Hello, everyone. We're about to go ahead and get started. So, who is Jasmyne Cannick, and why has the Counter Narrative Project selected her specifically as a Black lesbian woman to honor at an institute devoted to the leadership development and social, cultural, and political future of Black gay men? Well, because when it comes to a champion of Black lives and equal justice, narrative shift work, and leadership, one of the best allies Black gay men could ever have, they don't come much better than Jasmyne Cannick. As a state and national strategist, Jasmyne Cannick has worked at all levels of government, developing custom-tailored communication strategies and messages for elected officials, political campaigns, and nonprofit organizations. She's an accomplished producer, journalist, whose work spans over decades, covering race, social justice, and political issues in print, online, radio, and television. Ms. Cannick is known locally and nationally for her efforts to shape public opinion and encourage civic engagement for positive social change while advocating for underrepresented and marginalized community. Now that's her sweet intro bio that's on her website. It doesn't nearly do Ms. Cannick justice, so we're gonna hit a couple of highlights. She successfully served, say that really quickly 3 times, successfully served several times as press secretary of the California State Assembly before going to Washington to work for the House of Representatives. As a multimedia journalist, Ms. Cannick is one of Essence Magazine's 25 Women Shaping the World, one of the most influential African Americans in Los Angeles under 40, and one of Los Angeles' most fascinating Angelinos by the LA Weekly. She is a former co-anchor and reporter for the evening news in Los Angeles Pacifica Radio, was a regular commentator on TV One News One, now with Roland Martin, on NPR's News and Notes, and is a regular contributor to KABC 790 AM's Midday Live with Dr. Drew. She is the co-founder of My Hood Votes, along with Compton rapper Eazy-E Wright's son, Little E, a voter registration initiative focused on Los Angeles County. She's the proud co-founder of the National Black Justice Coalition and a past co-chair of the National Stonewall Democrats Black Caucus. And if y'all ain't tired already, she's also a film and television producer. Ms. Cannick has helped usher in such esteemed projects as the documentary 41st and Central, the untold story of the Los Angeles Black Panthers, and a show we've mentioned today at least once, Noah's Ark, the first African-American LGBT television series that was on Logo. And if all of that wasn't enough, lastly, Ms. Cannick has led the charge and kept the political and media pressure on to bring alleged multimedia murderer and Democratic operative Ed Buck to justice for the murders of Gemmel Moore and Timothy Dean. Cannick was one of the first, if not the first, to break the Ed Buck story and was unrelenting on the matter long after the news cycles had lost interest. Maybe if they hadn't moved on and the prosecutor's office hadn't failed to bring charges immediately following Gemmel Moore's murder, Timothy Dean would be alive today. God only knows how many others have been spared because of Cannick's tireless commitment to the issue. It's an honor and privilege to share the stage with our Institute's keynote speaker, Jasmyne Cannick. Let's get it.
You didn't have to say all that.
We have to give you your props, with it. Give you your flowers while you are here and looking fabulous. All right, first let me say welcome and share that I have been a fan of yours way back since the early aughts, when you were sharing about your health and fitness journey through blogging. You were doing body positivity and blogging long before either were on trend. And what is it about you that has made you such an early adapter of new media and technology in your work?
That's great. No one's ever asked me that question before.
I am a journalist.
Yeah, so from one journalist to another, that's a great question. I try to keep up. I've always been that way. Just from a young age, I was on computers really early, and I'm one of those people who study communications trends. And so like when social media was taking off, when when it was really clear, for example, during when President Obama was the candidate Obama, and we saw how the use of social media and technology was really propelling, for example, political candidates into areas that and reaching people that they hadn't reached before. I really grabbed onto that and started to study that, because as someone who works on political campaigns, specifically in the area of strategy and communications, I can tell you they didn't even used to care about their website. So a lot of candidates were running and never even had websites. And so just watching the sort of proliferation of how social media has changed our lives for the better and the worse. I gotta say that. I've tried to sort of keep up, because again, if you want to meet the people where they're at and you want to talk to them, you have to speak to them on the mediums that they're using. And so at that time when I was doing that, and I did gain back a lot of the weight that I lost, but it's all good. But it was fun when I did it and to share it, because I knew there were like a lot of other women and people, period, who were just kind of struggling and going through that as well. And I did it so publicly because it helped me accountable. When everybody knows that you're trying to lose weight, and it just was a great way to hold myself accountable.
I mean, it was also pretty vulnerable. I remember thinking that at the time, because I was just starting to gain. And I remember being like, she's being so vulnerable on social media. She's like letting everybody in. Like, where's that fearlessness in being able to let people in and be able to see all of Jasmyne Cannick come from?
I mean, we're all human. Everyone struggles with it. I'm so happy that today we're having more conversations around body positivity and things because I just did a whole panel last Saturday called Dear Skinny Friend, where it was basically mostly Black women who had, some of them brought their skinny friends with them, but we had this whole conversation around basically fat people are like the universal group that everyone of any race, any sexual orientation, gender, whatever, can still discriminate against. If you think about it, everybody still gets on fat people. It doesn't matter, And we were just sort of having a conversation of over the past 20 years, how that conversation's evolved. And back then when I did that, again, I was struggling. I still struggle. My struggle is real. I'm a big girl, and I'm okay with that. And I'm still trying to lose weight, but more these days is because I don't want to become a diabetic, and there's certain health things that I'm really concerned about. But I just felt like I know I'm not the only one, and I wasn't. And one of the things that came out of doing that was meeting so many wonderful people, men and women, who were like, yes, girl, I'm doing the same thing. Can we do it together? I want to go hiking with you, or I'll go to tennis with you, or, and then just also talking to people from across the country who are also struggling in their own weight gain, weight loss situation. That struggle is real.
Yes, ma'am.
Amen.
That's real.
I know everyone here is eager to hear more about your involvement in the Ed Buck case, but I want to take advantage of the fact that you're an activist, thought leader, storyteller, and public intellectual at a conference where we're talking about all these things. So I know you got some nuggets to offer this room. So you mind if before we get into Ed Buck and all of that,
okay,
we talk about some little bit of other things. So talk about your interest in politics and journalism and how that first came about. Which swayed your interest first between the two?
I've always been a writer. When I was younger, I actually wrote a novel. I wish I could find that novel today, but I've always been a writer. And so for me, over the past 20, 25 years, it's always been sort of a balancing act of politics, journalism, activism, trying to put all the things that I love together. And so that's why whenever I have to update my bio, it's such an effort for me, because it's I do work in so many different areas. I love journalism, and I love the way that today journalism is in the hands of everyone. I love that regular people are breaking stories that the mainstream media isn't aware of, and that they have to follow behind bloggers and vloggers. I love that the mainstream media is getting called out on their bias and their racism in their reporting in ways that 10 years ago, 15 years ago, when no one would ever question the New York Times or the LA Times or CNN or call them out. And I'm happy that they're being challenged and called out, especially on their lack of diversity in terms of their producers, their reporters, and in particular, not just the people in front of the camera or in front of the mic, but behind the scenes. I've been in those rooms, and it's like, where black people at? Where the black people at? You know, so I'm happy. I like the changes I've been seeing. I think we're gonna see a lot more. For me personally, I'm always gonna be a journalist. Like, I'm always gonna find time to write about stuff and talk about stuff. That's what I do. I like to live a certain lifestyle, and I like to,
Say that,
and I love working in politics, and it just pays me more money. I'm not saying my journalism hasn't paid me, but so yeah, and I'm passionate about both. You know, I started working in politics under a man named Mervyn Dimley, who is a legend for black people in this country. He was the first foreign-born, well, they would say foreign-born back then, we would say immigrant, who was elected to the United States Congress. He was originally born in Trinidad, and he went on to become a lot of firsts in America, and first in my state, California. He served as a state senator, a state assembly member twice, and he was our first, and to this, he was our first black lieutenant governor. When he went back to the assembly the second time, because the first time he served there weren't term limits, but so when he went back the second time, I was fortunate enough to work for him, and I studied under him, and I learned from him because the man was a legend. And from Kennedy to Castro, I could go on and on, the Black Panthers in Sacramento, he was there. When you look at the history of black people, particularly in California, between the 60s and the 80s, Mervyn Dimley played a very big part. And I got my start working in the state assembly as his press secretary. He was also chair of the Black Caucus, so that also gave me the opportunity to serve the Black Caucus. And then Mr. Dimley was a big proponent of getting other black people elected. I say that because we struggle with reaching back to bring other people with us as black people. We struggle with that. And some of us think we get in these positions and we're gonna be in them even in the grave. From the grave, we try to dictate who's gonna replace us. We know before we die, this is who will replace us. He was one of the few elders that I worked with that wasn't afraid of young people, that wasn't afraid of young people usurping him or taking his place, and worked really hard to bring folks that were younger than him, help get them elected, help get them active in politics. And so there was a point where he worked really hard, made us work really hard to get all these additional black folks elected to the state legislature in California. And one of those people then went on to run to replace Juanita Millender McDonald, who was a congressman. We had 3 black congressmen for quite some time in California. It was Maxine Waters, who's still in office, Diane Watson, who has since retired and been replaced by Karen Bass, and it was Juanita Millender McDonald. Juanita passed away of cancer suddenly. And Laura Richardson was drafted to replace her, and Laura was won. And then she wanted me to come work for her and be her press secretary. And Mr. Dimley was like, yes, go. He was like, everybody, he still had this Trinidadian accent. He was like, everybody who wants to work in Congress should have an opportunity. And he gave me his blessing and sent me on my way. And that's how I ended up working in the House. And from there, I just kept going. I came back to California, I've worked as a political consultant for quite some time. I've done a lot of work on the local level with different cities like Inglewood and Compton, Linwood and Carson. Currently, I work for the president of the city council, president emeritus as of this week, in the city of LA. And I love it because I like to be, I want to, when I landed here in Atlanta, one of the first things I said to Milana was, oh, I love being in the city where there's a lot of black people. There's a lot of black people doing things because LA is losing its black people thanks to gentrification and the high cost of rent, the high cost of living, we're actually moving here. And we're moving back south, and we're moving in, we're leaving LA. And so my work that I try to do is to make life better, not just for black people, but specifically for black people so that we aren't pushed out of our neighborhoods and our communities, and that we can stay, and in our, in the city that we love. And I'm going to continue to do that. I mean, as long as there are black people in LA, I will be there. I travel all around the world, all around this country, all around the world, but I will be in LA. That will always be home.
Now, lots of people in this room are seeking to actively work with the media to counter the prevailing anti-black and anti-black LGBTQ messages that still come fast and furious from the media circles. As an insider, what advice would you have for them in accessing and utilizing the media to engage in that critical narrative shift work that shapes public opinion about Black lives?
Well, I mean, that's ongoing. First of all, that's an ongoing conversation, right? I mean, the way that we are portrayed in the media, I mean, that's the whole reason why we have the black media in this country, right? When you think about it, because our stories weren't being covered, and when they were being covered, it was from a perspective that made us out to be, the criminal, the villain. And so, this is work that I currently engage in, right? So I too am also always trying to challenge different narratives that I see that's being put out there. And I guess the advice that I would offer is to be consistent, and to not be afraid to challenge folks. Look, we have people who are a part of our community who don't stand up for us, and they're on television every night, Monday through Friday, okay? So, I mean, if you work in this, for these entities, and you can't even do it, obviously it's going to be hard for us as outsiders, right? For as folks trying to engage these folks, but be consistent. Like, don't give up. It is very important because one of the things that I will never forget traveling around the country with Noah's Ark when we were first introducing that was how many people kept coming up to Patrick and myself and the cast and saying, I never get to see myself like this. I never have seen these images portrayed in this way of me and my friends, or me and my relationship, or me and my community. We've made some progress, I think, in terms of the mainstream media. We have all these different shows that are out now, which I think are great. We need more, Clearly, there's still a lot of work to do when you can have the Academy Awards nominations in January 2020 and one black woman is nominated. But again, and I think for me, and you'll find this like in all the work I do, it's usually around being very consistent, like not giving up, just persevering, just staying that road, like, you tired and you weary, you tired of saying the same things over and over again. I look at, for example, the chapter of Black Lives Matter in Los Angeles. They are very, very consistent. For over a year, they have been protesting the district attorney. Rain or shine, every single week, they don't miss, standing outside her office demanding a meeting. And it might be going on, it's way over a year, I think it might be even 2 years, but they've been able to make a lot of progress and call a lot of attention to what's going on in our district attorney's office by doing that. At first, it was kind of like, why are you guys going out there every week? She never comes out, she always sends the sheriffs out there. But as it went on and on and on, people started to take note and pay attention and say, wait. And of course, they were right about a lot of the things. They continue to be right about a lot of the things that they're complaining about when it comes to our district attorney. But what I admire was their perseverance in just being consistent with it. And so I tell organizations and groups all of the time, when you take on campaigns and you take on issues, don't let it be for that day or that week. Nothing good comes easy. Sometimes it takes a long time, as did with Ed Buck, right? Sometimes you just have to stick with it, especially if you know you're right. Right? If you know that you're right and what you're saying is right and what needs to be done is severe and serious, stick with it. I also tell people that it's a marathon, not a sprint, too. Right? And that's where I used to have to tell the folks that were working with me on the Ed Buck stuff all the time. It's a marathon, not a sprint. Because a lot of young men in LA who were very, very mad and upset about this Ed Buck situation. And we'd be doing these different protests and stuff, and they would be so mad. I'm like, don't have a heart attack out here. Like, I'm just as mad as you are, but I don't need you to burn out. Like, you don't know how long this is gonna take. I need you to understand it's a marathon, not a sprint. So, release it a little bit at a time.
At any point during your process in working the Ed Buck case, did you feel that you were putting yourself in danger by going after Buck? Or were you ever directly threatened?
Well, I always get threats but I've been getting threats from crazy people for years. Most of the time I shrug it off because I know that they're not coming to my side of town. And if they did come to my side of town, I got people. Yes, I got people. No, seriously, one time, short story, one time I was, so I am not for the death penalty. I know I'm in Georgia. But I come from California. I don't support the death penalty. And there was a man named Stanley Tookie Williams who was set to be executed. And I was, at that time I worked in the legislature, and we were petitioning, at that time, Governor Schwarzenegger's clemency secretary to give clemency to Mr. Williams. And it was this national story, this whole big thing, and I was really active in it in LA. And this radio show gave out, my contact information. And I remember Minister Tony from Nation called and said, I'm gonna have these brothers parked outside your house the next couple, and they were parked outside my house. They did their shifts, but so my community looks out for me. So I don't worry too much about that. But on the Ed Buck, yes and no. Here's the thing. If I allow myself to worry about that, I would not do what I do. So I kind of just have to walk in faith and do what needs to be done. Because for me, if I start to think about that, am I being followed? I use common sense. I do look and check when I walk outside. I still do that. Okay, the man has money. Okay, I do still check. You know what I'm saying? But I just can't allow myself to just wallow in that and just really worry about that, because if I did, I'd never leave the house. We have this app in LA called Citizen, and I'm always tweeting about it and stuff, because I'm like, oh, everybody in my neighborhood has a machete. Every time I'm getting an alert on my phone, oh, guy with the machete in the street, guy with the machete doing this, guy shooting or woman shooting. And it's like, again, if I just focused on the app, I would never leave my house. So I just you just kind of have to walk in your faith and know, for me, I know my community has my back. Just like I have their back, they always have my back.
Walk us through, for those who don't know, how you got involved with the story to begin with, and what made you refuse to let it go after so many had moved on.
Well, a reporter friend of mine in Los Angeles had asked me to speak to Gemmel's mom. He thought that I could help her. And at the time, she was trying to get a police report. I think she needed a police report and a death certificate for her son, Gemmel. And, I don't know how it is in Georgia, but in LA, that can take forever. When you're trying to, if you have insurance or you're trying to do the final arrangements for your loved one, there are certain things that you need, right? And she was having trouble getting it. So that's how we ended up connecting. And then that's when I learned about what had happened. And then I was like, oh. So I wrote about it. Because part of the issue in her eyes at that time was that nobody was listening to her. There were a couple of people that also were a couple other entities, including the person that told me about it, that wrote about it, who had written about it. And one of the outlets that wrote about it did it, not my friend's outlet, but this other one did it for clickbait reasons. And so the headline was, black prostitute dies in Democratic donor's home or something like that. And it really broke her heart. And it was getting cited and quoted everywhere. And I said, well, I'm going to write about it. Because I have a pretty big following, particularly in the LGBT community. I love it. Even my haters read me because they just got to know what's going on, right? So I'll take that. So I wrote about it, and then I just had all these men start emailing me and reaching out to me on social media, and they were just like, oh, you need to hear my story about him. And at first, because, look, I am not going to even sit here and try to portray to you that I am a woman of the streets and that I know anything, at that time that I knew anything about crystal meth or sex work or any of that whole area. Because I don't. That's not my experience, right? And so I think anybody upon hearing some of the stories I heard would be like, get out of here. That can't be. But then you got these text messages and these voicemails and these videos and these photos. And it's like, oh wow, that's the same couch. Oh my God, that is the same mirror. Hey, that is that man. And it was a lot of that. It wasn't just one or two or three, it was a lot of men. It was people reaching out to me from Arizona, where he was originally from. Saying oh, he has a long history of this type of behavior. And so I didn't write about all of them, but I did write, as you know, many of their stories. And it helped paint the pattern, show the pattern. A pattern that people didn't want to see, that people didn't want to acknowledge. I can't tell you how many progressive Democratic folks said to me, well, let's see what the investigation turns up. Well, even, with law enforcement, it was like, well, they're basically, their attitude is kind of like they're sex workers. They're, these young black gay men. Here's this white, upstanding, West Hollywood resident who donates to a lot of folks and, he treated the dogs that he saved off the street better than he treated the black men he brought to his apartment. And that's real. And so, as you know, I, started tracking him after that. And the reason why I didn't let go was because, look, I am not a mother. I don't have any kids and I'll never have any kids. But I sympathize with mothers who lose their children, particularly in tragic ways. For maybe the past 10 years, I've met a lot of mothers and fathers who have lost their children. From Latrice Richardson, who was the young black lesbian who went to a Malibu restaurant, didn't pay the bill, got arrested. They let her out in the middle of the night, and we found her body in a ditch 9 months later. To this day, no one knows how she died, right? To the mothers who have lost their children who were killed by the police, right? I've met a lot of these women. And that's a pain that even if you're not a mother yourself, when you're talking to them, that pain radiates off of them and you feel it. And, a lot of black parents get a bad rap for, in some cases, justifiably so, for how they treat their queer children, okay? But she loved her son. She loved Gemmel. Gemmel's birthday was 2 days ago. And it's still very painful for her because that was her first child. And so I tell people, because some of the other work I do in LA is I work with different law firms, mostly black law firms, who bring these cases against the police department for the wrongful death of mostly black people. And that's how I do it. Another reason how I meet all these families and mothers and stuff. And they trust you. In the role that I'm in, I have a responsibility. Like, Gemmel's mom doesn't live in LA. Timothy's family doesn't live in LA. They rely on us, who are there they rely on us to keep this fight up. To not let it go. And just out of respect and love and admiration for all of the black men in my life, particularly the black gay men in my life, why wouldn't I? I get asked that question a lot by white reporters, why did you care so much? And my response is, well, why shouldn't I? And the other thing I get a lot, which I think is hilarious, is people always think for people who don't know me, right? Because I had to go through an adjustment period where I had to understand that there are people who have known me for years and know exactly who I am. And then there are these people who are just now hearing my name and they don't really know me. So they think I'm this black straight woman out here fighting for black gay men. And it's that would be very admirable too, and I think that would be great, but that's not me. But they just assume oh, she's this, look at this black straight woman out here fighting for black gay men, and I'm not exactly, but yes, I am fighting for them. But yeah, I think, I would hope that if something bad happened to me, for example, and I was somewhere where my family and my friends weren't, that people, and it was, suspicious, You know, I always tell people, if something happened to me and it's like a one-car accident and I die, don't believe that shit. I would hope that people would, you know, fight and investigate and look at things and try to figure it out. And that's what we did for these families, and it was very important because they weren't there. But you know why else it was very important? Because he was still doing it. Like, that was the other thing. Like, so here's the thing. And I know I saw the little time things, I'm gonna try to do this as quickly as I can. But here's the thing. I had somebody die in my house. Me personally, even if it wasn't a meth-related death, okay, I would probably move. Personally, I don't need the bad mojo, okay? Like, not enough sage in the world. But let's just say that it was a meth-related death, and like I said, I would move. He, on the other hand, you know, had someone coming up the steps the very same night. I don't know if you guys saw the news video where he actually, like, they're bringing Gemmel down, and you got somebody coming up the same night with his bags, right? And that was very angering, the fact, because you and I know that if it had been one of you that had someone like Ed Buck, or even someone that looked like yourself die in your place, you wouldn't have been left there.
No.
You would not have been left there. You would have at the very least been taken in for questioning, but probably been arrested on some felony charge. Yeah, you wouldn't have been able to talk your way out of it. Oh, I was in the shower. I just try to help these young black men. I'm their savior. I'm not sure what happened. I came out the shower and he was just naked on the mattress on the floor, dead. Really? Right? And you know what is so tragic about how Gemmel died? Is that Timothy died on the same mattress, on the same floor, in the same living room, of the same situation. Same exact mattress, like same. And so you think about this 16 months between Gemmel's death and Timothy's death, and all of the men who didn't die, but who he brought there. I in particular remember saying at a press conference directly to our district attorney, who was a black woman, Jackie Lacey, it's not a matter of if another person dies at Buck's house, it's a matter of when. And 6 months later, I get a phone call early in the morning, and the person who was calling me was crying so hard. I already knew what they were going to tell me before they said it to me on the phone. I already knew. And we had a lot of men that did not die in Ed Buck's house over the past 2 years go through Ed Buck's house. And then this last one, who I've gotten to know, who overdosed and managed to make it out. He's a special man. I mean, they're all special, but him in particular, just because, he really helped us get at these federal charges. And he himself, is trying to put his life back together and move forward. But the reason why I didn't stop is because more people were gonna die.
What's next in the fight to bring Ed Buck to justice, and what should we all be doing to try to help ensure justice is rendered in this case?
Okay, so, we have 3 lawsuits. Well, no, we have 2 lawsuits and 1 criminal case. Well, no, we have 2 lawsuits and 2 criminal cases. Let me try to break this down. So we did file a lawsuit on behalf of Gemmel Moore's family last year. We actually went to court this week on that. Oh, it was awesome. And because the reality is, money is not going to ever bring your loved one back.
Right.
But taking money from those who have harmed you is sometimes the only way to get them to understand, to change. And Ed Buck has a lot of money, and he's used that money to hurt a lot of people. And so why shouldn't that money be redistributed? Why shouldn't that money be redistributed to the people who he's harmed? Okay, so I feel I have no problem suing Ed Buck for his money. So we filed the Timothy Dean lawsuit last week on behalf of his family. And then we have this state criminal case that our district attorney filed, which is basically a nothing case. But we have our big case, which is the one where the federal government, the Department of Justice stepped in. And so we go to trial in August. And so right now, he's got 5 charges. So administering the drugs that caused death, 2 counts of that for Gemmel and Timothy. And then he's got 3 counts of administering methamphetamines. We're hopeful that we get additional charges there in that category as well. So 20 years is the minimum on the administering the drugs that cause the death, right? 20 is the minimum, right? So we're looking at minimum 40 if you were convicted on both of those. The other ones, I think 20 is the maximum. Either way it goes, he's like 66, I think, at this point, 66, 67. That's almost a life sentence for him. So we are pushing to convict him. We want a conviction. Jail is a holding place. You know, from jail you go home or you go to prison. And we want to see him go to prison. His eviction was final December 31st. So he is no longer a resident at 1234 North Laurel Avenue in West Hollywood. And he did fight it from jail. He had his high-priced attorney come into court and really fight that. Because, you know, he had been there over 20 years. I wouldn't want to live in that apartment. I don't know what they're going to do with that apartment. Because the kind of spirits and I wouldn't want to live there. But it's a vacant apartment.
You'll be taken.
I'm sure for $3,000, $5,000 a month. And you know, he hired Christopher Darden to represent him in his criminal case. So yeah, it's gonna be an interesting 2020.
Chris is always on the wrong side of the
Well, here's the thing. He's a loser. He lost in the OJ case. He loses case, but it is what it is. I would tell people who want to stay engaged and make sure that you are on the email list, you know, justiceforgemmel.org. We also have a private Facebook group. We'll be ramping up our asking people to contribute to the legal fund. So we have to pay for the civil lawsuits. We pay for those, the families pay for them. And that does cost a lot of money, but you know, it's for a righteous cause.
They're like a GoFundMe for people?
We have a GoFundMe legal fund, and it's on the website. Anyone can donate to it. But continue to talk about this threat. I'm always amazed at people who don't know anything about the Ed Buck situation. Like, are you living under a rock or something? But talk about it. Let people know. I mean, look, this man, to me, he is a serial killer. And he particularly went after this community. Like, he was clear in his intentions on who he wanted and who he wanted to harm. People who he thought nobody would care about. You know? Excuse me, I don't feel so well, but my voice is doing a lot better today than it was yesterday.
We're going to wrap up with what's next for you. And how can we be more supportive of you and your work outside of this particular case?
Oh, thank you. You can sign up, you know, my regular website is iamjasmyne.com, and you can follow me on social media. The biggest support that you guys give me is basically events like this, like getting your feedback, feeling your love. That's important to me, right? Because I think when you step out and try to be a leader, if you look behind you and no one's there, what kind of leader are you, right? And so for me, it's really important that I'm always in step with my community, and that I hear from my community, and I really appreciate you guys bringing me here and having this conversation with you. It's really interesting because now, like, a lot of groups like around the country, they do want to do this too, like they want to talk about this, and I'm so happy to go and talk about it because there are ed bugs everywhere. Let's be clear. There are not just ed bugs in West Hollywood. There are ed bugs everywhere. There are Black men, okay? We are in danger. So it's great. I'm happy to go around and talk about it and hopefully inspire other folks and just for us to know, because when I think of Ed Buck, I also think of the murders of our Black trans sisters, right? And how they go underreported, that those cases aren't solved, even when we know who did it, like charges aren't brought. So it's clear that we just have a lot of work to do, particularly around our very existence, like our very lives. And one of the things I want to make sure to say before we close is that I learned what a devastating drug meth is working on this, and what a devastating drug it is, particularly in the LGBTQ community and the Black community and the Black LGBTQ community. Like, it is killing us. And so that's also like a focus, a part of the work that I'm trying to do, particularly when I talk to, is to mention that. Because Gemmel didn't do meth until Ed Buck did that to him and basically turned him into an addict. He told us in his journal what happened to him, even though other people didn't believe him. And so I just think, and the meth is not an issue just in LA. It's around the country. I'm sure it's an issue here too. Sure. And it is affecting our communities. And we need to be there for one another when it comes to that.
Well, thank you so much.
Jasmyne Cannick.